saying men should be dangerous. By dangerous, that implies I should be ready to threaten someone, to hurt somebody.
No, you should be capable of it. There's nothing to you otherwise.
Welcome to the Dangerous Man Podcast, where we talk about how to become a better man, take responsibility for our mission, create value for others, and the many failures and lessons we've learned along the way. Stay dangerous. Good morning and welcome to another episode of The Dangerous Man. This is your host, John Kostohris, and joined by co-host
Adam Thooft. What is up?
Oh man, Adam and I were kind of having some fun banter just a couple moments ago.
Goof time.
Yeah, it was what were we talking about again at the very end there?
I think we were talking about what if we did like the same episode over and over again, but just like changed it just slightly, and it's like the same title, but then like number 2, number 3, number 4.
Yeah, like take
number
1,
5.
take 4, take 5.
Yeah.
Our thought was like, what if we just didn't come up with any original ideas and we just repeated what we did because we couldn't come up with any more content
over and over again.
Take 16 and be like,
yeah, it's like a Fast and the Furious franchise at this point.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think they're on like Fast and Furious 22 or something like that right now, right?
I think legitimately,
32.
They like legitimately might be on like Fast and Furious 10.
Yeah, I know. That's so crazy. They just like keep making movies. And have you ever felt that way about like, slight side tangent, but have you ever felt that way about like, like Ice Age made like 4 movies, and then
I'm
like Pirates of the Caribbean made like 5 or 6,
and they're probably gonna make another Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, and it's just, Toy Story did what, like 3, and I
think Toy Story did 4.
4. Oh man, I think it's this thing as creators from like a in a movie perspective, it's very much like they're obviously monetizing and making money on all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, oh, if one idea just freaking slapped and like did really well, like on the first try, they're like, like Finding Nemo.
Well, I come up with an original idea.
Yeah,
we could do the same idea and make just as much money.
Yeah, keep the characters, keep the world, just write like a part 2 story and introduce a couple new characters, and and then that wave of people that loved it, you'll get them all back for more, to get them to open up their checking books one more time.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's like a fantasy that everyone's like kind of living in, but then like when the movie ends, then the fantasy's done. So it's like, oh, I was like on this adventure with these characters, now it's done. But then like when they make the second one, it's like, oh, I get to like be with these characters again, and it's kind of like the same adventure, and it's kind of cool, and that's why the 5th Star Wars sucked. Anyway, or not the 5th, sorry,
5th,
8th. That 8th one, because
I was gonna say,
Luke Skywalker was no longer Luke Skywalker. It is like,
yeah,
what'd you do? Like, I wanted to be on an adventure with Luke Skywalker.
Don't
again,
even get me started on Star Wars.
Anyway,
this is a little bit of a sore spot for John. No, that's good, man. It's funny though, because like I actually am glad that a lot of franchises make sequels, because I think you put it pretty well. But just to I guess conclude this thought, I kind of like love the characters, and when a movie ends, I'm like, but I'm not done spending time with you. We just got to know each other.
Yeah.
And so it's nice when they have more movies, because it's like I want to go on more adventures with these people. Oftentimes that's what movies can turn into, is like very much a connection with the characters, and and in that world, and when that movie ends, it's like, oh, I can never have that back. What? Or I just rewatch it, but it's always nice when they can kind of continue that.
That's if you
really connect.
If the movie's done well and you connect with the characters well, that's what will happen.
That's something Adam and I have discussed before, just off the cuff, about how movies sometimes you can really love the world and the characters, and it's sad when it ends because it was so good.
And that's why you like it when they make a sequel, unless the sequel sucks.
Yeah, that's why it's like some of them are like, you clearly just made a sequel because you could monetize a sequel, not because like you actually made it a good movie. Mm-hmm. However, I felt like the last thing I'll say on this, I could go on about movies. I'm a little bit of a movie nerd, but Finding Nemo 2 or Finding Dory it was. Mm-hmm. I thought that was actually a really good sequel. Mm-hmm. Like they also took their sweet time coming out with it. It was like
10 plus years.
10 plus years, but they it was just so good in my opinion. And some other movies, I think they rushed it and kind of just like rushed it to the market.
There's definitely some sequels where it's like, oh, that was good. Could have been better. Like Incredibles 2, really good. Except there's like a couple of things that it's like, okay, they could have done. Like there's certain like. Yeah. There's a lot of jokes that they made that were like, we're with the characters again, and this is funny. But then there's some of the plot that's like,
It's like you have to kind of like the white elephant, or is it the white? No, just screw that. The elephant in the room is the fact that we haven't seen these characters since the first movie that came out like 10 years ago. I feel like
it might have been like 11
half
or 12
the movie is just them being like, remember these characters? Well, we're back. And it's like, we get it. Just move on.
Well, the thing is, though, when I was watching it, I found like being with the characters again was really enjoyable.
Oh, don't get me wrong.
They need to actually like have the rest of the movie be good.
Exactly. I just don't think you have to like be like the character's back, because like in Star Wars Episode 8 they did this where Han Solo comes out and he like the screen time was just like he comes out and he just sits there and he's like, yeah. And then it just like pauses for a long time. And when they showed the movie in theaters, everyone just started cheering. It's almost like it was almost like and Han Solo's back. Wink, wink. Remember Han? Like, yep, we're Star Wars. Yep, still Star Wars. And they did it like 6 times. And I'm like, okay, like I get it, but like, we just want you to dive into the movie. Like, yeah, it's like enough of the. It should be. We haven't been around for a while.
Like, a movie should be good by itself, and the people that don't understand like the emotional context of the character, like it's been so long since you've seen this character. It's like it doesn't matter. They like the character should come back, and everyone should be like, wow, but they're moving on anyway.
Exactly.
Like make a good movie in and of itself, and the people that really like the characters will be like, this is great. But also don't change but also if you change who the character is off screen, it has to make perfect sense to that person, to that character's like character arc. Like if you do something with the character's like character arc, how they change, and it doesn't make sense, then it's like, okay, this is stupid, and the writers sucked. That's why the writers sucked at writing Episode 8, because Luke Skywalker is not Luke Skywalker. It doesn't make any sense.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, this is a giant soapbox thread.
This is quite potentially one of my most easily triggered soapboxes that you could, if you ever, meet me in person or me as a friend and you listen to the show, if you want to get me going, just start talking about movies and poke the bear. Anyways, that leads us perfectly into our topic today, which is what philosophy is and what it's not.
It's dunking on the 8th Star Wars movie because it sucks.
That's exactly what it is. Oh man. But there's this idea that Adam, we kind of were like, when we made the joke earlier of the episodes that repeated themselves and like take 16, it was like sometimes I think when a content creator is, and I'll keep this brief, but the idea is like a lot of content creators obviously are creating content and, composing or writing or coming up with ideas on what they could post about or share about or, make a YouTube video on or whatnot. And I think something that makes content really good can often be that there's a very cohesive idea that has been researched and kind of scripted and practiced to a point where you can really, knock it out of the park, do the topic justice. Mm-hmm. But I think when it comes to regular content creating, unless it's your full-time job and you can really just spend a lot of hours prepping that to get that, or you have a team around you that can help do that, or you can kind of just talk with a bunch of ideas and, they can, whatever, chop it up. And, I think a lot of what Adam and I have been talking about is how do we, what does it look like to produce content regularly and kind of get better at that? And so I think one idea that we had was sometimes you're not always going to have like something you've well researched or well read, or it might be like a little nugget, but it's not quite valuable enough to like actually go in depth on because you just don't know much about it. And to be like, I'm an expert and I understand this and here's why you should care. It's like,
because I read the Wikipedia article.
Yeah, it's like, okay, whatever, man. Like it doesn't make it valuable content, but I think that's really funny, Adam. It's too true. But we don't I think that's actually a point they bring up here is not even just like, we don't want to fall into any type of a regurgitation. Anyways, this is a slight longer explanation on some episodes that we want to start introducing. We want to have an element of, here's an idea. Let's have a little bit of philosophical discussion, which I'm going to get into kind of what philosophy is on a high level. I'm not an expert by any means, but I think at its core, it comes down to the ability to ask questions and kind of rationalize and propose possible like arguments or ideas. And it's just basically like a great way to actually have constructive, logical, conversation thinking sessions with yourself and with others. And so I thought it'd be interesting to just read a couple paragraphs here from a website on philosophy, and then kind of wrap that for the day. And this might lead us into some episodes where we can begin to not necessarily have answers or come to conclusions per se, but to be able to just do some reflection and have some interesting conversation around an idea, which again is kind of the basis of philosophy. So with that said, dive right in here. But so the headline here is that the unexamined life is not worth living. And that's by Socrates, who I can give you a ton of context on Socrates, but he's like an ancient Greek philosopher, I believe.
Basically, Plato and Aristotle happened because Socrates happened.
Yes. That's good to know. So it says the word philosophy is derived from two Greek words, which I might botch, philion and sophia. So philosophy literally means love of wisdom. What does it mean to be a lover of wisdom? Philosophers today and historically have promoted being open-minded, intellectually humble, curious, and creative in our thinking. They have championed the view that we should not live in fear of being, quote, being out of the loop from contemporary trends, and that we should not obsess about what is currently fashionable with the present in crowd. They have searched for wisdom while rationally disputing certain definitions of it, as you probably expected, and have rejected wallowing in intellectual darkness. They have promoted the idea that we should practice mindfulness and not mindlessness. Philosophers promote the idea that we should live the examined life, as Socrates once put it. That means detaching from social personas and social scripts, and truly thinking for oneself and coming to own one's own thought, and not simply repeating or being an echo of the voices of others. Kind of last couple more here. In their quest for wisdom, philosophers promote the search for deep understanding and truth. They promote the use of careful observation and logic. The search for wisdom also means contrasting our worldviews with other worldviews and engaging in critical dialogue with others who think differently. It means not digging into egocentric and ethnocentric point of view to rest in a cognitive comfort zone. It means accepting ideas, not out of mere loyalty to tradition or out of fear, but rather because those ideas are objectively well-grounded and rationally justified. And lastly here, for philosophers, this kind of creative and critical thinking that aims at wisdom is what it means to be fully human. For them, this is tapping into the authentic self. It is also central to learning how to live well. So they go a little bit on and on and on. But I wanted to kind of give a little blip there. And so I guess this is where, if we were having a true philosophical conversation, there'd be some sort of premise that you come to, you introduce. And I think the idea of the premise is some sort of like an idea or a statement, or like, hey, I think this could be true. This is an idea that I'm thinking about. And then opening the can for people to discuss different angles to basically kind of try to rip at it from every point to get to some sort of an objective conclusion.
Well, from that conversation,
on logic and rationale.
Yeah, from that conversation, you can kind of form an argument. So it's like, okay,
right,
here's the premise, but then we have like the different. Man, it's been too long since I've taken logic. Took logic freshman year of high school. Still remember a little bit of it. Was the name? Come back to me. So you have the different. You have a conclusion, and then you have like supporting premises.
Gotcha.
Premises,
yeah.
That might not be the correct term for it. What's the?
Well, it's kind of like when you do like a debate where you have like you state your case, and then other people get a chance to rebuttal, that kind of a thing.
Well, it's kind of like the logical, like, if A is B and B is C, therefore A is C.
Gotcha. So the premise is you were able to stack them and basically,
and it like logically follows that you can like literally be like, this is logical. And if the logic follows, then it has to be, and it can there's true and there's valid. And if it is both true and valid, then it is sound. And you can have like a logical argument that is valid, but there's a certain statement in it that it isn't true, so therefore it's not sound.
Right. What do you think the downfall of, people's communication, when it comes to the types of ideas and beliefs that people hold? What do you think, like, from a logical standpoint, is kind of what I'm getting at here, but what do you think is kind of a downfall of a lot of, people that don't necessarily study logic or think critically?
A lot of people don't know how to have an actual like good argument. And when I say argument, I say like in the logical sense, where it's like, hey, let's create certain premises that come to a natural conclusion, and if the logic follows, then we can all agree, and we just make sure all of the logic is valid and all of the premises are true, and then we can all naturally come to a logical conclusion that makes sense. But at the same time, there's certain people that will have emotional reactions.
This is what you observed, or
that they don't want to get to the logical conclusion because their emotions get in the way of them thinking reasonably or logically, because maybe they had some experience that they don't want to have to deal with.
Wow, that's quite a synthesis there. I mean, let's break that down. I've definitely noticed that in conversation, it's easy for myself to, like, this happens a lot, but like, it's easy to start getting emotional about something. And what I mean by emotional is like, angry, happy, sad, excited, like I have this personal like love of, hockey or like this, take our conversation earlier. Actually, I have this love for Star Wars or whatever. And when, all of a sudden you're seeing people take that and like do stuff that you hate in the episode 8, right?
Yeah.
And naturally I get really like worked up and like, you can't do that. And, how dare, it's just like, and all of a sudden it turns into, I have these emotional, like, it's just way too personal. And I'm not really looking at facts or logic or reason, or I'm just like, nope, I don't care because you hurt my feelings.
Well, I think objectively you can say that episode 8's a terrible story, but
oh yeah, yes.
I think logically we could make sense that episode 8 is terrible.
we could probably make it. We could probably get there with some premise and argument for sure. But it's the kind of thing where I think what you're trying to get at, though, Adam, is this idea that it's very kind of, a lot of the people I've observed in life, just it's common to bring too much emotion into something without really examining, am I or am I breaking logical fallacies here?
Yeah. Like, I think,
Am I actually, you know what I mean? Like, people haven't been taught, you know, I was taught what the logical fallacies were, which if you don't know what those are, it's like a list of like 13 or whatever, like actual things that are people use in their writing or in their talking or in their arguments that are legitimately false. They are philosophically sound fallacies that go against logic.
Yeah.
And we could actually get to a whole episode talking about those. It's so fascinating. But most, you know, people I've actually talked to, like, honestly haven't ever even heard of those. Like, they never learned much about that. Yeah. Some schools teach it a little bit about logic, but
I think all schools should.
Yeah.
If they actually want to be a legitimate school on teaching people how to think in general, not what to think, but like how to actually come to logical conclusions.
First of all, why do you think logic? First of all, why do you think logic and understanding it is important?
Is because then you can come to a conclusion that everyone should agree on based off of logic, rather than just having a bunch of emotional arguments and separating into like us versus them, because there's a couple of different emotional camps and they're just kind of fighting each other.
Whoa, that was a couple things there.
So
why don't you just give one idea? It's helpful for philosophy.
I'll break this down. So you have in logic, if people are going to have a good logical argument, now what I mean by argument is the logical type where it's just like, hey, you put forth premises and it comes to a conclusion and you examine them and kind of make sure it's valid and sound.
Sure.
And true.
You present an idea and then you discuss the idea.
And if you do that properly, everyone should be able to agree on the conclusion. However, how most people think about arguments now is when I said, hey, we have an argument.
Why do they need to agree on the conclusion for it to be a valid argument?
Well, the thing is, if it's valid and true, you should agree on the conclusion, because it all makes sense. Because that's what logic does.
Yeah, but I don't think that and we're getting into philosophy right now.
Yeah.
I don't think that, like, you could come to me with an argument about how creamy peanut butter is the best peanut butter.
Mm-hmm.
And you could give premises and logical reasons why. But when it comes to my turn to be able to list my, premise and give my argument for why I think chunky peanut butter is the best peanut butter, I could have also very sound reasons, but that doesn't mean at the end that we're going to agree on one or the other. And so I don't think I agree that what you're saying, I don't think that an argument has to result in everyone agree. I think what it would be true to say would be an argument can resolve in being able to see the truth more clearly.
Yeah.
And maybe pick apart stuff, but not necessarily like we all agree on.
Yeah. The thing is, though, is if
we're talking a philosophical conversation, that's different, because it's kind of designed to basically settle on ideas that are true objectively. But in just like people arguing in regular life, I don't think it's fair to say that you're going to conclude an agreement with one another.
I think if you make good arguments, there should be a mutually agreed upon like outcome, and it could just be like, hey, between creamy and crunchy peanut butter, it's actually based off of preference, based off of past experiences of your childhood, and yours are different than mine, and so it's fine for you to like creamy and me to like chunky, or whatever way.
That's the objective fact is that the preference is based off of and that's the agreement conclusion you could come to.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. See, that makes more sense.
And you can find that because, like you like chunky, I like creamy. I actually am a crunchy peanut butter guy, but
yes,
superior. Or is that just because of my childhood?
It's the only way.
Yeah, so if you don't like it, then you're stupid, and that would be that'd be an
emotional.
ad hominem.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that was
just attacking you instead of the argument.
For the next 20 minutes, we're gonna give you a bad example of our argument. That's the freaking what? We just go. Just don't get it too emotional.
But like,
anyways, you were.
But the thing is, within a logical argument, if the argument is valid, so all of the premises naturally lead to the conclusion by logic, and it makes sense logically and reasonably, you actually can't question the conclusion.
Right. It's designed to build like one Lego on top of the other Lego.
Yeah.
Of like, this Lego is objectively true from every angle that we can see based on what we know about other things that are true.
Yeah.
Like you said, A equals B equals C. And it's like, okay, that's how you build the Legos. A on top of B on top of C.
A is the same as B. B is the same as C. Therefore, A is the same as C.
But you can, and you keep layering a new Lego on top. So it's like, by the time you get to the end, you have a tower and the conclusion's on top of the tower. But it's like, that's almost how when I've sat in on some people, having more metaphysical or philosophical conversations, it's often that's how it takes place is we're able to kind of one step at a time only walk on ground that is true and logical and reasonable. And then I'm able to therefore kind of have a logical string of premises or ideas that everyone can agree on. And so it's cool because a lot of philosophers, and we'll kind of wrap here, but a lot of philosophers, what they had done was do a lot of these types of conversations where they had actually sit down and discuss different things about morality, society, ethics, different types of things like that, and come to agreements on ideas and concepts. And so a lot of philosophers nowadays actually learn how to do all this by studying and reading, like Plato, who are some other guys, Socrates, Aristotle, and some of the other philosophers as well. But because they actually build upon the foundation of the ideas and thinking that they've already done and use that as like this is already kind of a foundation to think off of. And so, a lot of them are able to move into more advanced type of thinking because they already I can already assume everything is true because it's already been thought through. That's kind of the cool thing of, in a very brief nutshell, that's kind of a lot of what a lot of studying philosophers can do is give this, a lot of our ideas that we already kind of live off of that we don't even really realize are kind of a foundation of thinking. So, but at the end of the day, philosophy is, I think, incredibly important as a skill to develop because it enables you to be able to think and reflect and actually kind of learn about yourself and come to conclusions. And I think in a time where I've noticed just a lot of people, and like we were saying, tend to be very emotion driven without really taking a step back and allowing themselves to think and be logical. And I think more than ever, this is a time where, as men, being able to actually be able to think for ourselves, and honestly, like if you can't do that, this is a premise we could argue another time, but I would maybe throw out there that I think it's very hard to be a strong leader and a strong man if you're not able to think for yourself and be able to logically have that, you know what I mean? Like have that thinking ability, have that discernment, that questioning ability.
Because if you don't do that, you're just like,
nobody can trust you.
Yeah, you're just kind of regurgitating other people's thoughts that you kind of like vibe with or something.
And that could be fine, as long as they're logically sound.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't know, we can get more into that another time. And so anyways, this is the chapter of different philosophy topics that I know. I actually have a good friend who studied philosophy and knows a lot more on the topic. Those could be some interesting guests to bring on in the future, just to have them kind of get into a little bit more of this. But from a very brief overview on the ocean the five oceans of the world that is philosophy. It's a very extensive topic.
It's a lot.
But I would leave us with one thought, which is that if you want to learn, how do I start being like philosophizing or start doing the process of having philosophical conversation, you can launch yourself right into it simply by asking the question, why? And you're already philosophizing, thinking about it and being able to answer the questions. And so that would be a great way to start in your own reflection for any listeners. And that's how I often, maybe subconsciously, reflect and think as I start asking why and digging it a few layers beneath the surface. And just, what would it look like if, I personally took more time in my life to sit down and reflect, maybe use a tool like a journal to write your thoughts out, to think. What would it look like if we studied logic and we weren't just saying things that weren't true or had no merit or emotional, but they actually just made sense and had reason. You know what I mean? Imagine just a new generation of men. As a listener, imagine yourself and those around you, and in your community, in your country, really rebuilding a foundation of thinkers in a time where it's so whoop. And just imagine what that would look like for this world, having a bunch of strong men who are able to think for themselves reasonably and be able to inspire and lead others. Share the show if you want to help other men embrace danger and become truly great. You've been listening to The Dangerous Man. Join us next time. Until then,
claim your greatness
and stay dangerous.